Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Rampage guide. Before we begin this video though, I should warn you that I will be showing gameplay of a Rampage, obviously, but this Rampage is going to include an Apex monster. There is no way for me to do a Rampage guide without giving you a strategy on how to deal with Apex monsters, so this is the way it's going to have to be. The Apex monster in question is going to be the one that was officially revealed through promotional material before the release of Monster Hunter Rise, so if you've been keeping up with that, it should not be a big deal. However, if you've been on a media blackout, just be aware I'm going to be talking about an Apex monster at some point throughout this video. Now, Rampage is one of those modes that I said before the game was released that this was going to be somewhat divisive between the Monster Hunter community. Some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of in between. And yeah, that has definitely been the case. I've seen a lot of people say they do not like Rampage, and I've seen a lot of people say that they love Rampage and they think it's a lot of fun. Now, one thing that I would advise you is to do them in multiplayer because they are much more fun in multiplayer, in my opinion, because the chaos that happens throughout the Rampage becomes much more manageable. But I understand that a lot of people do not have Nintendo Online. A lot of people just don't even like playing multiplayer all that much. Like, I understand the struggle, so this guide is going to be friendly both to a multiplayer setting as well as a single player setting. And also, I should mention that when I say that in multiplayer Rampages are more fun, that does not mean that they are not fun in single player. And I've seen a lot of people complain about the difficulty of Rampages, and let me tell you guys right now from the get-go, Rampages are not hard. The difficulty of the Rampage is basically how chaotic and overwhelming it can become. That is absolutely correct. They are very chaotic and can be very overwhelming due to the fact that there's a bunch of monsters rushing in and you're going to be getting tossed left, right, and center, and it can get frustrating to just see your hunter rolling all over the floor. Just know that that is something that is going to happen during a Rampage, and just be prepared to counter it to the best of your ability, because usually when you're doing a traditional hunt, you can do your little dance with the monster and it becomes a one-on-one and you're like analyzing patterns and stuff like that. In Rampage, that is not your objective. Your objective is not to analyze the patterns of the monsters that are advancing onto the Stronghold. Your objective is to take them down as fast as you possibly can. You're not really meant to fight monsters in a traditional way. You're just meant to play tower defense until the counter signal is fired. And we'll talk more about the counter signal further in this guide. But just be aware, this is not a traditional hunt. You see the monsters coming in, you're not supposed to go rushing in and try to beat the crap out of them. That's not how Rampages work, okay? Now, when you first get to a Rampage, one of the things that you will notice is that there are these wooden trap doors spread throughout the zone. This is where you can place your hunting installations. This is where you're going to be placing down ballistas, defender cannons, and all of the other types of defenses that you can set up. And it is very important that you are aware of the locations of each of these hunting installations so that you are always aware of how to counter the advances of the monster. Because, like I said multiple times, this is very much a tower defense mode, okay? Until the counter signal is fired. At that point, it's kind of like Dynasty Warriors almost. But we'll talk more about that as we go forward. Another important thing to notice when you first reach your very first Rampage map is where the yellow arrows are. It should be fairly self-explanatory, but for those of you that didn't get it, yellow arrows is exactly where the monsters are going to be coming from. So this gives you, you know, a little bit of an idea. Okay, the monster's going to come from here. Where am I going to be placing my defenses? But before we talk about where you place the defenses, what kind of defenses do you even have to place? So if you approach any of these wooden trap doors, you'll be able to press the A button, and that will give you like a menu, and it will show you the types of things that you can place down. Now there's 3 different tabs. There's a mountable tab, an auto tab, and a limited tab. Now, the weapons on the mountable tab are player operated, so that means whenever you place one down, if there's not a player behind it actively using it and shooting it at monsters, they're not going to do anything at all. The auto tab includes weapons that are villager operated, so whenever you summon those weapons, a little villager comes on top of them, and the villagers will automatically aim the weapons and shoot them at monsters. However, it is important to mention villagers are not going to be as effective as players. So, you know, they're going to get a little bit of damage in, but they're not going to be dealing as much damage, or they're not going to be as efficient as a player behind a weapon of the same caliber. There is also a special weapon in the auto tab, which is the Wyvernfire Artillery, which I will talk about later in the video, that requires a little bit more of micromanaging, because it's not just an automatic weapon that will automatically shoot at everything. You have to actually manually aim it, but we'll talk more about that later. And finally, the limited tab is going to include the NPCs that you can summon throughout the rampage. These are very important because they're going to deal a tremendous amount of damage in a very short amount of time, and an item called Dragon Bait. And the way the Dragon Bait works is basically you set it down and it is going to attract the attention of certain monsters, but not all monsters in the rampage. This is a very important thing to keep in mind, because plenty of times I've sabotaged myself by placing down a dragon bait expecting a certain type of monster to go after it, only for the monster to ignore it and move right past. So while we're on this topic, it is important to talk about monster types during a rampage, and there are 3 monster types. There's going to be symbols on top of their heads which will indicate exactly what type of monster is. If the symbol is red, almost like a vampire's teeth, that is a monster that is going to be going after hunters. So basically, if there is a hunter somewhere, that monster is going to try to get to that hunter and attack it. That is going to be its main purpose. If the monster is got like these green arrows pointing down, which is the symbol of the, I don't even know what the actual type of monster that is called, but that's a monster that is going to attack your installations. They're very annoying. They're going to basically try to target the defenses that you've put up, and they're going to go after them and try to disable them. That is going to be their main objective, so those are also very important for you to take down as fast as you possibly can. And finally, the most important monster for you to keep track of is going to have the symbol of a broken gate. It is a blue broken gate. These are the Gate Crasher monsters. And the Gate Crasher monsters, they will just ignore anything that is happening on the field and go straight for the gates. That's their purpose in life. They don't care if they die along the way. They're just going to go straight at your gates, and they're going to... That's how you can predict their behavior. Like, you know exactly where they're going to go the second that they land in the thing. And this is one of the most important monster types for you to destroy. The second a Gate Crasher is on the field, that is the one that you want to be targeting with as much as you can. Naturally, the other monsters are going to be a nuisance that are going to be trying to stop you from destroying the Gate Crasher, but Gate Crashers should be your priority. As a matter of fact, if there was a priority list for the different monster types, I would say start with the Gate Crashers, kill the ones that are trying to get rid of your hunting installations, and only then go after the other ones. Because the other ones, the ones that are going after the hunters, are usually the ones that will deal, that will make the least amount of a mess out of your defenses. So that's kind of like your priority list when it comes to the different monster types. And this is something already that just knowing that is going to make rampages a lot easier for you. Now, in terms of your hunting installations, you can have a ton of player-operated machinery, so the ones for the mountable tab. You can place down a ton of them. The limits are really not very important, because even if you have 4 hunters in there, you have more than enough to build, I think, almost like one of each, with the exception of the machine cannon. You can pretty much build one of each for each one of the hunters. So don't worry too much about the limits there. However, on the auto section of things, you're going to be very limited. So you really need to pick and choose where you place these automatically operated weapons. The limit is going to be 5 Defender Ballista, 2 Defender Cannons, and 2 Wyvernfire Artilleries. There's also another thing in the auto tab, which is bamboo bombs. These can only be placed in installations that are in the ground. So not the installations that are up on top of like walls and stuff. These can all be placed in the ground. And bamboo bombs, what they do is they just blow up whenever the monsters go by them. And then after a while, another one will shoot up and it will blow up again when another monster goes by it. So bamboo bombs are cool, but you don't necessarily always want to just fill everything that you can with bamboo bombs because there's a limit of 3. And, you know, you're going to have to remove the bamboo bombs if you want to summon an NPC to that location. So be very wary of where you place the bamboo bombs. I'm not going to be able to cover every single map and the best place to put bombs on every single map because, you know, there's a bunch of different maps and it's not going to be particularly useful for you. It's better that you know when to use what. It is also important to mention that whenever the fence gets destroyed, whether that's a bamboo bomb that detonates or a defender ballista or a cannon or something like that, it's going to take a little while for it to recover. And during that time, you cannot replace that defense. So you want to always be thinking ahead. Whenever you see a defense that's about to go down, and you think that you really need that defense to be up, you want to go there and you want to disable it, you can just basically go and you can hold down A, and then you can summon it again. There's no resource management or anything like that, so there's no penalty for you going around different installations that you see are low on health and destroying them and just building them back up again. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is the limits of the amount of things that you can have, which, like I said, in terms of the auto ones, which are probably the most important ones, you can only have 5 ballista, 2 cannons, 2 wyvernfires, and 3 bamboo bombs. Now, the first time that you get into a rampage, you'll notice that all of these things that I've been talking about are not going to be available. That is because they're not available from the very beginning of the rampage. These things will start becoming available as you survive the rampage, which makes the time in between hordes that much more important for you to continuously upgrade your defenses and reposition your defenses according to the current situation that you are experiencing in your stronghold. So survive and your weapons get stronger and you get more weapons added to your arsenal. Okay, so now that you have a basic understanding of the elements that constitute a rampage, let's talk about how you're going to be surviving your first rampage. When you first get to the Stronghold camp, that is the very first area that you land in for that specific rampage, they're going to give you like a big thing right in the middle that tells you, this is your first wave and you got 120 seconds to set up your defenses and do all of these things. The first thing that you want to make sure that you do is there is a rainbow-colored spirit bird. It's constantly shifting between different colors. You want to make sure that you pick that up because there is a way to kind of just like run past it and not pick it up. So make sure that you pick it up. That is going to max out your health and stamina. Depending on the petal list that you have, you're going to be basically having those instantly maxed out. It's the equivalent of picking up like all of the spirit birds on a map. So it's going to give you everything. Then there's a chest, obviously, that's going to have some consumables there. If you don't take anything else, at least take the Farcaster. There's an item there that looks like a green piece of smoke. Take that item. That is a Farcaster. We're going to be needing it for later. Now, the first gate that you will go to is going to be the one on the left. It is going to be marked with red painting on there, and I believe that usually the gate on the right is going to be closed. We'll talk more about the gate on the right, but for now you go to the gate on the left, which is marked with red paint. Go there. Once you enter there, you'll notice that you should be able to see the yellow arrows that I told you previously. That is where the monsters are going to be coming from. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to scan the map. So look around and see what path the monsters are going to take, assuming that they can't break down the walls, which the first couple of monsters are not going to be able to break the walls. They're going to be funneling towards the gate. And you're going to want to set up your defenses based around that. You want to try and defend your gates as hard as you can. Now, it can be very tempting for you to basically just start placing defender ballistas to the closest spot where the monster is going to be coming from. I would advise you not to do that. You want to plan for that first gate getting busted fairly early. So you don't want to put all of your defenses like on the first line of defense. Usually what I tend to do is I will put 3 defender ballistas on the first line of defense, and then I will put 2 defender ballistas on the second line of defense, wherever that happens to be. So basically behind the first gate. I'll put 2 defender ballistas behind the first gate because let me tell you right now, I know that a lot of you are going to have that instinct that I tend to have whenever I'm playing a game of this nature, which is, I'm not even going to let them get past the first gate. That's fantasy. The monsters are always going to get past the first gate unless it's Team Darkside handling your defense, okay? Unless you got Team Darkside in there defending everything, you can just assume the monsters are going to make it past the first gate at some point. And at that point, you want to have some defenses behind the first gate so that it's not like, oh, they went through the first gate and now there's nothing there. So usually the division that I tend to make is I'll put 3 in the first line of defense, 2 in the second line of defense. Then you place down a ballista for yourself. So just select the position that feels comfortable for you, put down a ballista for yourself, and then you can ready up and send the monsters in. You can actually just hold down the right stick and that is going to send the monsters in. This works for both multiplayer and single player, okay? So if you're in multiplayer, you should try to set up a ballista for yourself and usually just have 2 defenders in the back, 3 defenders in the front. And, then the wave is going to come. Now, very important thing, the ballista can fire 3 types of ammunition, okay? You can fire your regular ballista shots, you can fire crag shots, and you can fire retreat shots. So crag shots, if you land them in the head, will KO monsters. Retreat shots will basically push monsters back. So ideally, you want to save your retreat shots for the gate crashers to delay that first gate getting busted. So the second the monsters start showing up, you just start spamming your ZR button, which is the regular trigger to just fire regular ballista shots. The ballista will automatically reload all shots, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Just start spamming fire the second the monsters show up. When if you get one of those green monsters that shoots at installations, you want to pop a retreat shot on him because that will bring him down. You will fall down to the ground and then you can shoot him in the ground. He's not going to be as much of a nuisance if you are shooting it in the ground. And when the gate crasher shows up, try to pop a crag shot right in its head. If you're able to land the crag shot in the head, you're going to hear like a little ting sound and he's going to fall down, and that's going to give you a lot of opening to basically pelt him without worrying too much. Another thing to keep in mind, you can also block while you are on a weapon. You do this by pressing the R button. That's the right bumper button. The thing is, you need to time your blocks, because if you block, you can't shoot, and you need to be shooting as much as you possibly can. So if you see an attack coming from a monster that is going to hit the wall of your defense, because usually they're going to attack the walls, because it's not like they can jump up there and start attacking you. So they'll attack the walls of your defense. And if you see a monster that is lining up an attack to hit your wall, hold down the right bumper button and you will block that attack and then continue shooting after the attack goes through. Okay? But yeah, basically this is going to be your first couple of waves. You're going to stay behind that ballista and take out as many monsters as you can. If they break your ballista, move yourself to another hunting installation, set up a different ballista, and keep shooting at them. This is going to be your objective. Stick to the ballista, shoot the crap out of everything. Eventually, during certain waves, you might see a message that indicates this NPC is now available to use. If you see that, you might think to yourself, oh, I should save this. I should save this NPC for when things get really hard. But the thing is, the NPCs that become dynamically available, they expire after each horde. So you want to make sure that you use them before the horde ends. So just go to one of the ground installations that is free. This is one of the reasons why I said do not just spam bamboo bombs everywhere, because then you're not going to have any ground installations free to put NPCs down. But go to one of the installations that is free in a path that it looks like the monsters will eventually go through, and place that NPC down there. He's going to deal a ton of damage. He's going to destroy monsters left, right, and center. It's going to be one hell of a good time. At some point during a horde, you're going to hear the message, and you're going to hear like a scream of a bunch of voices going like, "Rah!" And the message is going to be counter signal has been fired. When this happens, this is the point where you instantly leave your artillery mount. You might think, oh, but I'm doing really good damage. Forget about it. It doesn't matter how good the damage is that you're doing on that artillery mount. You're going to do more damage if you go up to the monsters and just hit them with your weapon. During counter signal, that is when you drop the artillery. As a matter of fact, here's a good rule of thumb. If the counter signal is up, get out of your defense, go attack monsters. If the counter signal is not up, then you're better off staying with your artillery. Okay? Now, assuming that you've done everything correctly and you've survived up until this point, you'll survive your first horde. That means that your stronghold is going to level up. Now, how much the stronghold levels up depends on how good you've done, how many monsters you've killed. And there's usually like an objective list on the left-hand side where your quest objectives are. That is going to include a bunch of stuff. Usually I ignore this list. I just do whatever the hell I want. But if you follow the things that are in the list, that is going to give you more points. That means your stronghold will level up more. So depending on the things that you were able to achieve from the list, your stronghold is going to level up and it's going to give you access to more weapons. So this means you'll eventually get access to cannons, mounted cannons for players, and defender cannons. Now, personal advice, cannons, I would probably only use these in multiplayer. This is my experience. This is not something that I will say as a fact, but I will tell you right now that I've had much more success sticking with the Ballista than using a cannon myself, because cannons are not particularly good at tackling aerial targets, and ballistas are. And whenever you get an aerial target, if you got a cannon, it's going to be hard for you to get to the aerial target. Sure, you'll be dealing a lot of damage to the targets in the ground, but you're not going to be dealing as much damage to the targets up top. Not to mention, cannon does not have the retreat shot, which is very useful to manage when a gate crasher is about to get to a gate. And, you know, you want to kind of like push him away. You can use the retreat shot. That's going to make him back away. And then you can use crack shot to stun him. I just find ballistas to be more effective. And on top of it, as you level up your stronghold, it starts upgrading the ammunition of your different artillery mounts. And ballistas get ammo upgrades before the cannons get ammo upgrades. So at some point, you might have an upgraded ballista. And I genuinely think that an upgraded ballista will beat the crap out of a base cannon. The defender cannons, on the other hand, are extremely useful because, you know, there's going to be villagers there managing those cannons. They're going to be AoEing monsters. So the second you get defender cannons, you want to try and place those down. Ideally, place them where you have good sight lines to the monsters, but also make sure that you place one closer to your gate, like the final gate, because eventually monsters will get through, and having a cannon there is going to help immensely. So the idea here is, in between each horde, just make sure that you position, you know, new defender ballistas and new defender cannons, and just place them in where you think they're going to do the most work. Remember, you don't want to place them too close to where the monsters are coming from, because, you know, once the monsters get away from that zone, your dudes are not going to have line of sight. They're going to be out of range. It's going to be a bit of a problem. Now, beyond all of the hunting installations that you are placing down yourself, each map is going to have its own weapons of destruction already in place. I'm talking about splitting wyvern shots. I'm talking about dragonators. There's even certain variants of dragonators that actually shoot up from the floor to protect gates. So pay attention to each of these things and utilize them whenever it is more convenient. I realize that a weapon like the Dragonator, we're used to basically waiting till the very last moment to actually use it. That's not how it goes in Rampage. You're supposed to use Dragonators when it makes sense. Like if a gate crasher is about to get into a gate and you have a Dragonator on that gate, you want to pop that Dragonator. You want to make sure that you do whatever you can to slow the advance of the monsters. And usually, whenever you have a map that has a Dragonator or something like a splitting Wyvernshot, you know that those things have beefy cooldowns associated with them. However, when it comes to the Rampage, there is a mechanic to reduce the cooldown of those weapons, and that mechanic is the power kilns. These should be fairly easy to identify. They just look like massive furnaces, and shoveling coal into them is going to reduce the cooldown of splitting Wyvernshots and Dragonators. However, this also requires a considerable amount of time invested by your part in order to shovel coal inside those things. So you usually, if you are doing it solo, you only want to be doing this in between waves or whenever there's not a lot of action in the monsters and you think that you can do it without actually getting punished by the monsters destroying your defenses. So keep that in mind. In multiplayer settings, however, I would heavily recommend, if you see that your team is handling everything just fine and you guys just use the Dragonator or a splitting Wyvernshot, then hit up the power kilns and get a little bit of regen in, because it will help to have those weapons available to you more often so that you can continue to repeatedly pummel the monsters into the dirt. Anyway, if you continue doing this for the next horde, it eventually levels up more and you get access to more weapons. This is when we're talking about Wyvernfire Artillery. Now, Wyvernfire Artillery is a very specific type of automatic weapon. So you'll want to put it where you have like a long stretch that the monsters have to go through, and you want to place it down. Once you place it down, you'll notice that it's got like a laser sight. You want to manually aim it, because that weapon will not turret like the rest of the automatic weapons. That weapon will only fire in that direction. So you can basically go up to it. You can press A. That allows you to, mount it almost like if you were about to shoot it, and you aim it to where you want it to shoot. And then there's 2 ammunition types that thing can fire. If you press X, it will fire like a laser shot that pierces through everything, which is really, really good. And if you press A, it fires like a fireball that does, I think, 180 damage or something like that. The way that I usually use these is I'll aim them to defend like choke points that monsters have to go through, particularly if there's like a long corridor. I'll aim it straight there, right there. Just remember, if you do not aim the Wyvernfire Artillery, it's almost useless. It's not going to do anything great for you. So after you place a Wyvernfire Artillery, make sure you manually aim it to where you think the monsters are going to be coming from, and just shoot it. As a matter of fact, at some point, you might even want to aim. If you're completely overwhelmed and the monsters are just getting through and getting to your gate, you can go to the last 2 defense spots near the gate and just have them crossfire right near the gate so that they shoot any monster that comes close to the gate. That's usually the way that I will put them down. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I've finished rampages with just these cannons melting down monsters, despite the fact that I like even carded and everything. The cannons just took care of the monsters, and it wasn't even a problem. Naturally, the Wyvernfire Artillery is going to be something that is going to require a little bit of micromanagement as the rampage progresses, because choke points change, and you will have to adapt to the changing conditions of where the monsters are coming from, where the monsters are reaching, and just make sure that they are hitting as many of the monsters as possible, because they are very useful. They inflict fire blight, they do all of these different things. So Wyvernfire Artillery is something that you definitely want to manage. Now, as the rampage progresses, you can get to a point where you're kind of like pushed up against the final gate of the rampage. And at that point, you will notice that there's usually a counter gong nearby that particular position. And if you see that you don't have like a defense set up and, monsters are coming through, you'll want to run over to the counter gong, ring the counter gong, and that is going to give you temporary counter signal, so that you can basically go up to the monsters and just beat the crap out of them. But that only gives you 60 seconds of counter signal. So you have to be very selective when you use that, because that is one of those things that is a one and done. Because after you ring it, that gong is gone and you can't use it anymore. So just keep that in mind. You'll probably see me use the counter gong at some point throughout this video because the monsters broke through. This is something natural. It happens. That's why the counter gong is there, to help you with managing that particular situation. Now, beyond your counter gongs, your defender artillery, and the Wyvernfire Artillery, and all of these passive defenses that you're setting up, and your active defenses, and all of that, if you get to a point where you're still up against the wall, monsters are about to bust down your gate, you can summon an NPC. Do not forget about summoning NPCs. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Elder Fugen is always available to be summoned at least once per rampage. So, if things are looking really dire, then summon Elder Fugen and boom. Now, if you follow these instructions, you should be pretty much well equipped to deal with any regular rampage. And what do I mean by a regular rampage? Well, there's 2 kinds of rampages. There are 2 Horde rampages and 3 Horde rampages. The 2 Horde rampages are usually just constituted of just that. There's 2 Hordes, and there's usually a stronger monster at the end of each Horde. And with the tips I've given you in this video, the monsters should never make it past your first gate. If you do the stuff that I told you, it is going to be very hard for them to get past your first gate. On the other hand, if it is a 3 Horde rampage that includes an Apex, that means that they are going to get through your first gate, okay? Don't even think about like, oh no, I can totally stop him in the first gate. No, when that Apex comes crashing down, he's going to smash through the entirety of your defenses like they weren't even there, okay? Just the first butt stomp that he'll do when he comes down will destroy all of your walls, all of your gates, and it will be just like pushed against the final gate of that zone. So what you need to do is in between the second and third Hordes, you need to back off and go to the final zone of the rampage, because there's usually 2 zones on each rampage, which is if the monsters get through your first gate, then there's still another zone that you can set up defenses in and that you can fight the monster, and that is where the final gate will be. So immediately after you repel the second horde, you want to use that Farcaster I told you to pick up at the very start of the video. That is going to bring you back to the initial Stronghold camp. And in that camp, if you look forward, you'll notice that there are 2 gates, like I told you. There's one gate on the left that goes to the first line of defense, and there's one gate on the right that goes to the second and final line of the fence. And that is where you want to go. That is the one that's got the yellow paintings on the pillars. So, after you repel the second wave, you go to that gate and you will see a whole new area, and you need to set up defenses there. You have to keep the things in mind that I told you, that, you don't want to put all of your defenses on the first line of defense. As a matter of fact, in this particular case, when there's an Apex involved, you actually want to load your defenses more in the back. Usually, I tend to put my Wyvernfire Artilleries on the very 2 last things before the gate, because the Apex just destroys everything, okay? Like, if you guys haven't seen an Apex yet, I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you probably have, you'll know that they'll just, like, destroy all of the walls. Another important thing is, when you're setting up defenses in that second area, set them on the edges of the map. Because if you set them on the walls that are in the way, the Apex can bust down those walls like they're not even there. So set up stuff along the sides of the map. That is your most solid defense. So the way that I usually tend to do things is the defenses that I will put on those, disposable walls will be like your Defender Artilleries. Then I'll put the Defender Ballistas. Then I'll put the Defender Cannons on the sides. I'll put the Wyvernfire stuff on the sides. And I'll put just everything that I can on the sides to basically be pelting at the monsters. Just look at the middle of that map as one big arena where you're going to be fighting the monsters. So you want to be setting up your defenses accordingly and just kind of ignore the middle walls a little bit. Put down some bamboo bombs and, pray to God that you get a couple of Defender NPCs to show up to help you along the way. Because, the Apex is going to be just, you have to throw everything you have at him. That is just the way that it is. Set up a machine cannon somewhere that you can pelt at the Apex as it is coming through. And that is pretty much it. Just set up the defense on that final area before you go back to the first area. After you're done with setting up the defenses, which it's going to be tight on time. It's very tight on time for you to set up the defenses in 120 seconds in that second area and then still go back to the first area, because you still have to defend that first area for a little bit before the Apex shows up, so that, you get as much uptime on your defenses as possible as the Apex is running them down, okay? So after you're done setting up your defenses in the second area, then you go back to the first area and you continue attacking the Apex. And I know some of you guys will be like, oh, but I don't know how to get to the first area now that I'm in this second one. Look at the walls. There's going to be like a rope ladder in the place that you have to go to switch between the different zones. So just look for rope ladders. That is how you can manually go through it if you don't have a Farcaster. Set up your defenses on the second area. Go back to the first area. Defend some more, like I told you at the start of this video, with the Wyvernfire Artillery, with all of that stuff. Defend as hard as you can. And then eventually when the Apex lands, try to deal as much damage as you can, because usually they'll give you a counter signal when the Apex shows up. So try to deal as much damage as you can throughout the duration of that counter signal. Once the Apex breaks through the first gate, then you run back to the second area, sit on your machine cannon, pelt it from afar, and basically at this point, it's just throw everything and the kitchen sink at the Apex, okay? If the counter signal is up, go whack at him with your weapon. If the counter signal is down, set up some kind of an artillery thing literally anywhere, because there's not going to be a lot of hunting installations left. So just set up something literally anywhere and shoot at the monster until the counter gong plays, and then you attack the monster. During this stage, they will most likely be giving you all kinds of NPCs to summon. Summon all of them. Like, do not skimp out. Just summon all the NPCs to bring out all of the damage. If there is a splitting Wyvernshot, use the splitting Wyvernshot on the Apex. Sometimes you might have a splitting Wyvernshot on the first zone. Use that thing on the Apex before you manage to break your first gate. Splitting Wyvernshot is one of the most important things in there as well. So NPCs, splitting Wyvernshot. If there's a Dragonator that you can use, throw it at him. It is literally throw everything you have at that Apex. And you don't even have to worry about carding, because the only penalty for carding is that you have to run back. That's the only penalty. There's no other penalty. You can die as many times as you want. You're not going to fail the Rampage, okay? Just throw everything at them. And I understand that this is a little bit confusing because, like I said, Monster Hunter is usually a dance. This is not a dance. This is a street brawl. You're basically just beating everything that you have into this monster. So just use everything at your disposal. But that is also why it is more fun in multiplayer, because it's more manageable, a little bit less chaotic. But if you do things right, it's not that hard. Like I can tell you right now, I've soloed every single Rampage in version 1.1.1 of the game. I've soloed every single one of them, and I haven't failed a single one. And I'm not saying this as oh, I'm so good, I didn't fail a single Rampage. Oh, it's just, I'm saying this because they're not hard. It's not hard to complete these Rampages. You just need to understand the mechanics and apply the mechanics. Once you apply the mechanics and you get to it, you'll understand that they're not that hard and that they can actually be pretty fun. Like, I think it's entertaining, particularly if you're playing with friends. I find them very entertaining. Even solo, I still like going at them every now and then. And they're a good way of getting defender tickets, which you can then use to upgrade your weapons with ramp-up skills. But not just that, defender tickets are also a good source for you to, like, you know, do melding charms and stuff like that, which makes Rampages something very good for you to grind if you want to meld a bunch of charms. So keep that in mind. Hopefully this helps you deal with your Rampages. Let me know what you guys think about this guide in the comment section down below. If you guys have your own specific tips for Rampages, then please post them in the comment section below to help out your fellow hunters. Thank you all very much for hunting. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like. If you did not enjoy the video, hit it up with a dislike. Feedback is important. If you usually enjoy my content, subscribe, bell notification icon, and all of that stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.
I